From AT, King Kong Cat Kong, apparently, on Twitter. Does fitting in with Minnesota culture play a role in how a team is put together? Example, lots of Scandinavian players, rarely a Russian on the team, generally reserved personalities.
No, I think it's the type of people running the show. I mean, Brent and Chuck have always, been concerned about Russian players for the very reason that they're having issues getting Kaprizov here, and frankly, they might have a GM that's the same way. I mean, this is a guy who's won history in recent years was Alexander Radulov bailing and leaving his NHL contract and going back to Russia. So, you might have a GM that has the same type of philosophy to kind of avoid these guys. But look, sometimes it works out. I remember it took, Kuznetsov was kind of the Kaprizov of the Washington Capitals. It took him a long time to convince him to come over here. They finally got him over here, and now the guy's one of the best players in the world, and helped lead him to a cup, and very easily could have won the Conn Smythe Trophy, led the Caps in scoring in the playoffs. So it's tough. It depends on the player. I think it's very important to interview these guys. I always believe that if these Russian players have been playing Canadian juniors in particular, that shows a sign that they want to play in the NHL and they want to come to North America. That's why I think Sokolov was worth the risk, taking him in the 7th round. And you know what? I mean, Russia made him pay. They've not put him on international teams for that stuff. There's a lot of politics that fans just don't get. I mean, just look what happened to Kaprizov last year. The guy didn't play in the World Championships. The captain of the World Junior Championships that led the tournament in goals was put on the Russian team and was not allowed to play. Why? Because they were holding him hostage, for a lack of a better term, to sign his KHL extension. That's the politics. So Team Russia was playing politics to keep him in the KHL. I mean, this is the type of stuff that these guys have to deal with over there. And the Wild paid the price for that.
From Daniel File, would trading for a restricted free agent's rights be a possibility? How do negotiations work in a sign and trade situation between GM and also GM and agents?
Well, sometimes there's, I remember when Devin Setaguchi was traded to the Wild, he signed a 3-year, $9 million deal with San Jose the day before, undervalued because he wanted to be part of a core with Logan Couture and Joe Pavelski forever. And they signed him. This is kind of what I meant with Zucker, that you got to be careful of signing too undervalue. And then what had happened is all of a sudden that contract was so tolerable to the Wild, $3 million for a 20-something goal scorer in Seto, that the next day San Jose flipped into Minnesota in the Brent Burns trade, and Seto was just ticked off at it. So sometimes you have that. And then other times, you can absolutely trade for a restricted free agent. We just saw the Montreal Canadiens do it the other day with Max Domi, and then they signed him the next day. The one thing that you won't see many teams doing, and you definitely won't see the Wild doing because they don't have their draft picks to pay for compensation, is sign guys to offer sheets where they're restricted free agents after July 1 that you actually get that player to sign with you, and then the other team has 7 days to match, and if they don't match, they get a bunch of draft picks as compensation depending on what the price of the guy's contract was. The most recent huge example, well, there was Chalmerson with San Jose and Chicago, but the big one was Philadelphia signing Shea Weber, the huge 14-year deal, and really, holding a gun to Nashville's head. They either had to match it or get a ton of draft picks, and they wound up matching it, and amazingly they were able to eventually trade him for PK Subban, which is going to be a deal that they're going to absolutely get the best of. So those are situations. And by the way, that's a perfect example of why I just think Nashville Predators fans are absolutely foolish when they boo Suter and loved Weber. Like, Weber, as a Group 2, actually went and signed an offer sheet with the Philadelphia Flyers and was trying to get out of Nashville. And again, I don't know if it's just Nashville Predators fans not understanding how that works, but, he was a hero, but yet, Ryan Suter was painted as the villain because he left as an unrestricted free agent. It's kind of funny.
2 more questions, and then a final not thought from Michael Russo. He's famous for his final not thoughts. Thanks again to Twill. Check him out, TWILL on Instagram, as well as twillmn.com. State Farm agent Tony Hoaglund, Hoaglund, and Fixology Repair, fixologyrepair.com. Downtown Minneapolis and Skyway, and 3rd floor of the Mall of America by Nordstrom's. Thanks to all of our sponsors. We do appreciate the support. From Generous Carriage, please recommend to Fenton that if he's going to make several moves with one team, to do so with a good team and not a perennial bottom feeder like Buffalo. Is there something to that?
I think so. Every move look, Hansel from Arizona, Chris Stewart from Buffalo, Matt Molson from Buffalo, Cody McCormick from Buffalo, Jason Pominville from Buffalo, although they weren't really a bottom feeder at that time. But I do think that there's a losing culture that's being painted, and then obviously we saw it with Ennis and Foligno. So there's a losing culture after years of losing, I will say that the deal that I'm hearing was with a bottom feeder.
Wow,
that
how about
I alluded
that?
to at the very beginning of this. So.
Wow.
But those are the teams, though. Remember, that are usually the ones that are looking to trade. Like right now, same thing. Buffalo, Carolina, Arizona are the teams that are making moves. That's why I also said that I do think that the Wild should consider really trying to swing a deal with a team like Anaheim, who is almost in a similar position as the Wild, aging, disappointed in the way that things went in the postseason. Having to re-sign guys like John Gibson and maybe Adam Henrique. So go after, maybe a Henrique or a Silverberg or something like that.
Right. Two more questions, Michael, from AT. With the new CBA, is there any way the Wild could get out of the Parise and Suter contracts?
Not unless in the new CBA they have a way to get out of it. But right now there is no way.
From Alec,
recapture would kill him.
Right. From Alec, would it be better to trade down and get a decent UFA rather than picking mediocre college kids?
I'm not exactly understanding the question.
I'm not either.
Down, if they trade down, they're still, if you're saying trade down in the draft, they're still going to be getting, either a college kid or a junior kid or something like that. In the spot that the Wild are at right now, a couple of years ago, there were guys like Kiefer Bellows, Colin White was 21, Brock Besser. These guys aren't mediocre college kids, so you can get it. If I'm understanding the question right, at the 20s, if you draft a college kid, you can still get a really good player.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't get the question.
All right, let's wrap up with another question from Luke. Should fans be concerned that the GM won't be running the draft?
No, that always happens. Heck, if you looked at my draft analysis today, one of the best drafts the Wild had the year it was Chuck Fletcher's was the 2009 draft that Tommy Thompson ran. Look at the amount of guys they actually hit on in the draft. They actually got Letty right. They just screwed up the trade. But you look at the rest of that draft, and they actually did pretty well. So, but this is the way it works. You can't on May 22nd fire all the scouts, and these guys have been preparing all year. Who's going to run it? Paul Fenton has been going to, Siberia and all over Europe and Western Canada and the 7 hours north of Manitoba and all these places. He hasn't done that this year, but the Wild scouts have, and the way it works is that you don't fire scouts before the draft, because they can potentially go to other teams and give them intel that from your meetings, and that's why Paul Fenton wasn't allowed in the Nashville meetings when he was going for the Wild job. It's just Brent's going to run this, and then I do think that there'll be changes. I do see changes potentially to the pro scouting department. I think they'll be tinkering with the amateur scouts. Then we'll see what happens with Brent. Brent has another year on his deal. Tommy Thompson actually did the draft with, it's kind of similar. He did the draft his first year, and another year left on his deal. And all of a sudden, they hired Brent in July. They were like co-assistant GMs that first year. And all of a sudden in April, it was actually kind of a shady thing, but he's he lands in Europe to do scouting in April, and he's fired. And so he got fired while in Europe by Chuck Fletcher.
Wow.
And you could conceivably see that happening with Brent, where all of a sudden, maybe in July or August, we find out that he hires whoever is going to be his right-hand man in the front office, but Brent stays on for the year, and then all of a sudden, when his contract's up, you almost take advantage of the fact that you got to pay him anyway, that he's still doing his job for a year, but then before you have to put him, in your meetings getting ready for the next draft, you let him go. So that could conceivably be happening. I just don't see Paul Fenton and Brent Flair coexisting forever. Like, I just can't see that Brent is going to last more than a year here if he's not let go this summer.
Do we have a Michael Russo thought or not to wrap up the show?
No, not really.
I knew it.
I have a final thought. Yeah, we haven't talked about Russo slacks. So you want to hear something really just creepy and sketchy? So
I don't know.
Dark picture in a steakhouse yesterday. Arpon, who I didn't even know that Russo slacks follows on Twitter, takes a picture of Ken Wiebe and this gigantic lemon cake that he has, and it's this dark picture. You can't see what's going on in the background. And all of a sudden, I looked at my Twitter account last night at like 1 a.m., and somehow Russo Slacks found that I was in this picture, blew it up, and tweeted that picture. Like, how creepy it is. One, that he even followed Arpon, but then two, like, had to blow it up to see that I was actually in the picture, and then screen captures and puts it out.
Man, I tell you what, I hope you don't have a pet rabbit.
Yeah. How come there's no, like...
That's a really old school reference, by the way.
How come there's no, like, Souhan parody account that stalks you?
There is, but I've hired a private security firm, and they've taken care of that.
Yeah.
Hey, we got the Russo sigh. We can end the show now. We got the Russo. We ripped Russo slacks. We got the Russo sigh. I think all is right in the world.
Pretty little city built on a hillside. Music in the bars and fire in the sky. We went to the beach and it was covered in ice. And I used to call it home. So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forgive.